I hope you guys have 2 hours to listen to the presentation today. Joking aside, take about 10 minutes to talk, and I love answering questions, so please come at me with a ton of questions. The 2 most common questions I get, and I'll just answer them now. I'm not a Yankee. I grew up in Wyoming and moved here almost 5 years ago. We're not Yankees out from Wyoming. My middle initial is not E. I named after my father, Robert Wadley, so it's W. So we can go those questions out right away. But a couple of things I'm going to actually disagree with Brad on. One, there is a ton of optimism I have for what it is that we will do in places like Cobb County, Gwinnett County, Fulton County. I don't look at it 10 years from now being an inevitability that they will be Democrat strongholds. Fully disagree. I think the Republican Party has as much chance to succeed there as the Democrats. Just is a matter of how much energy we put into it. And the second thing I disagree with things like Brad on is the reach out to these demographic groups. And there's a reason why, and I'm going to explain that. I don't think we need to reach out to demographic groups. I think we need to connect with individual people. And that, as chairman of the Young Republicans, is one of the greatest things that I get to do. Because it highlights what it is that those really under the age of about 34, 35, right where I'm at, it's the way they view the world. We do not view the world as demographic categories. We view the world from an individualist perspective. Names matter more than anything else. So when you talk about a diversity in a room, guess what? There is nothing more diverse than the range of personalities, the range of experiences that you get from people. When you talk about diversity, we as Republicans can set ourselves apart because we treat people as themselves, by their name. It's the one thing nobody can ever take away from you. It's the only thing that you can give somebody freely. They can never take your name if you don't let them. So we as the Georgia Young Republicans really kind of operate under that paradigm. Our mission is to create an environment where anybody, any Republican, but certainly those under the age of 40 can come and be themselves, own their name, and find ways to make their life better, not only politically, but professionally and personally as well. There's a range of experiences, friendships, business partnerships that you get out of the Young Republicans. We want that environment to exist. And why is that the case? When you look at party identification, anybody born after 1980 has about a 50-50 shot of saying, I may be conservative, I may be liberal, but I'm not a Republican and I'm not a Democrat. You compare that to what's called the silent generation, those born and raised during the Great Depression, fought in World War II. That party identification is about 18, 19 percentage points lower. Or independent identification is about 19 points lower. So what does that tell you? Younger voters like a place where they can be themselves, be an individual. Older generations grew up in a society where your individualism was really defined in the context of the community you grew up in. And let's look at what those experiences have been brought on by. I mean, how many of you, I've got my iPhone right back there and it's actually live streaming this presentation right now. How many of you could do that when you went to a Republican Party meeting 10 years ago? Nobody, right? But younger generations live and connect with individual people in that fashion. I mean, cable television is the exact perfect demonstration of that. How many of you had 400 channels growing up? Nobody, right? I mean, I'm really about the oldest you can get and say, I remember vaguely what it was like to have a clothes hanger attached to the TV to pick up a signal a little bit better. I mean, vaguely. But my little brothers, they don't remember that. And my little brother is only 5.5 years younger than me, 6 years younger than me. Doesn't have a clue. But what is cable television? It is highly individualized marketing and communications. You have HGTV, you have a History Channel, you have ESPN, 400 channels now, the SEC channel. I mean, you just have everything. whereas you used to have ABC, NBC, CBS. And so the way news was communicated was highly generalized. The way shows communicated were highly generalized. And the way that exists now, you have MSNBC on the left communicating to liberal news watchers, the 12 of them out there that exist. And then you have Fox News communicating to right-leaning news watchers, the 400 million, it seems like, that exist. But not only that, you have internet-based radio and television now. I mean, that is the world that younger voters grew up in. So when you communicate to people, communicate to them as an individual. There's one important question that you can ask anybody that doesn't involve politics, but it will be the foundation for any strong political relationships. What's your name? The second question to follow up that, what makes you who you are? Now, we as the Georgia Young Republicans, again, operate under that mindset. It's why we have a strategic plan that is focused on building the networks that we need to communicate to a greater group of people across Georgia than we ever have before. We're doing a pretty decent job on it. We have training programs in place. We call them Base Camp, that actually focuses on individual development of the people that attended. And we had college Republicans, young Republicans, and party members attend. We have this really, really fantastic event coming up in December. Who here loves Star Wars? I do, right? Again, if you remember when they came out in the late 70s and early 80s, which I don't, probably pretty excited about them too. But the idea being that we can bring together a ton of political nerds and Star Wars, science fiction nerds, and have a good time together, regardless if you're a young Republican, college Republican, or party member. But at the end of the day, if we want a Republican president to win, we have to connect with individual people. We don't have to connect with communities in the sense that we just have to talk about community issues. Every person is different. Identical twins are going to have nuanced differences in their personalities. They may be very similar, but there will always be those differences. And 10 years from now, when I'm in my mid-40s, that's just going to be 10 years of younger voters becoming eligible to cast a ballot, who are going to think more and more in line with that individualized mindset. And it's going to become a point where we cannot recover as a party if we don't change that way of viewing the world. I don't think we as a party need to change our principles about the politics, but we certainly do need to change our principles about the way we treat people. We need to start talking to people, individual people, if we ever want to last beyond the next couple of elections. That's what we do in the Young Republicans. It's what I try to encourage everybody to do when you're speaking to young Republicans, because it is the way that we as a party will succeed. So with that said, any questions I can answer? Anything? Or I can go on for 20 more minutes.
You pointed out some really good points. Most Republicans are, against illegal immigration and that. And I've noticed a lot of Hispanic groups on around, when they hear that same message, they think it's more of a racist, type thing, and the message is different. And I guess the millennials, having grown up, say the public schools, that are sitting with a lot of ones that may be legal or illegal or whatever, don't see the issue, as much as, we do. And I'm not really trying to know where I'm going, but you're right. The messaging of my generation, I grew up 3 channels and public station type. But you're right. There is a difference. The millennials view things, and one of the hopes is the earlier millennials, which tended to be more liberal. Now the later millennials are actually more conservative because they see how it hasn't worked. So there's a
sure. And even if they grow up to be more conservative, they're still not joining the Republican Party necessarily, because they still see it as a large institution where their identity gets lost. Now that said, in regards to issues like immigration, I think you'll find that everybody says laws should be followed, that we should have an immigration system where the laws are enforced, where our government has a system that allows people to come into this country to seek a better life. But on the same token, a friend of mine, Will Kramer, he was the college Republican chairman, he said it best in an immigration panel. These are not illegal aliens to me. These are friends that I grew up playing PlayStation with, right? So they know them as Chris or Steve or Nancy the same way they would know me as Rob or know him as Will. That relationship, that experience, again, is highly individualized. So they look at it through the prism of, well, this is what I experienced in my life. So it's, our questions tend to revolve around, why is it that we're sitting here talking about an immigration system that is the very definition of big government? We say enforce the laws on the books. That seems to me to be ridiculous, because the law on the books, in my mind, create a condition where men with guns are knocking down doors and taking people away. I mean, everybody remembers the Elian Gonzalez fiasco, what, probably 15, 20 years now? What is it Janet Reno did? Kicked in a family's door and took that young man away. Sent him back home. Seems kind of terrifying to me. So younger conservatives will sit here and say, let's come up with some smarter laws. And I think that's a good way to do it. Clearly define what it is that we as a business community and country need to make that fabric of what it means to be American a little bit more enjoyable for us and the people we interact with. So, now I get called a rhino for that, but I don't really care. It doesn't matter to me, because I feel and I know that my life will be better when I'm with good people. Individual people. Doesn't mean everybody, but individual people, and I can guarantee you, not all Americans are enjoyable to be around. Just the truth. So, any other sort of questions or comments or concerns?
I have a daughter that's in college in Tiffany,
Mm-hmm.
and it was mandatory that they attend a talk given by Jimmy Carter. It was mandatory, and she had a real problem with that because she's been around me for too long. But the colleges, as a rule, are liberal, and the kids are indoctrinated in all the liberal beliefs before they go out and find out how life really is in a lot of ways, but they're indoctrinated in that. So what are the young Republicans doing to help counteract that?
Yeah, it's a great question. One of the things I'll say is we actually have a great partnership with the college Republicans. And again, this defines, in my mind, a little bit about the differences between the Democrats and Republicans. Younger voters in the Republican Party really have three distinct organizations they can belong to. They can belong to the Young Republicans, which are really identified as young professionals, college Republicans, and then there's a teenage Republican group that kind of train everybody before they're even eligible to vote. Young Democrats are the young Democrats. You get pumped into an organization and there really is no difference. So that's the first thing we do, is we partner with college Republicans because they're the ones that operate on campus. I think they call themselves the best party on campus, which I would tend to agree. So they do a lot of that work with college students to make sure that they have those opportunities. Generally speaking, I would say we as Republicans have to embrace that chance to learn a little bit about the philosophies we're trying to counteract. I paid partially my way through college on a debate scholarship. So I was a geeky debater in college, much like Brad was in high school. If you want to talk about a community that makes general college look pretty tame, be a member of the debate team. Very, very left-leaning. Militaristic Marxist left-leaning. Imagine how fun it was for me. That said, I embraced that opportunity, even though I had to argue things that I knew were absolutely wrong. And I knew had no basis in the real world whatsoever. I took that opportunity to learn from it. So naturally, we as conservatives have to be able to train our peers or our children to sit there and say, you might not like it, but use this as a chance to learn something, as opposed to using it as a chance to stand against the liberal bastion of college environments. I mean, it's not going to be changed overnight. It's not going to be changed in 2 years. We're not going to change it through big government policies. We're going to change it by understanding how we can better argue against the left and better connect with individual people than the left can. I wouldn't have liked going to Jimmy Carter, but then again, I don't like going to a lot of conservative speakers either. So I would tell you, use this as an opportunity to say, here's a chance to learn. And again, that's younger voters who are not politically active will generally look at it like that. They may have a mindset about what they want to see, but they're not necessarily going to be as antagonistic to saying, well, I don't want to see Jimmy Carter. I mean, that's just, it's a perception.
I still don't think that's an answer, because I think that there's with the media and with everything else that goes on, there's so much indoctrination in the left side. And I don't think we do a good job of counteracting that in any way.
Sure.
I mean, you're saying join the Republican Party, but these kids don't even know about the Republican Party a lot of times, because there's no influence there that is getting to them, that's giving them the other side, is what I'm saying.
Then let's go give them the other side. I mean, it's just as simple as that.
That's what I'm asking.
I mean, well,
how are they
it
getting
takes a lot of hard work. I mean, it's not as simple as saying, present one side of the view and then present the other, because that's no guarantee. But I guarantee you that if you go and ask a college student what's important to them, you're going to have a better foundation for showing them how conservatives really think than you would by having Jimmy Carter and then having George W. Bush or somebody else, right? I mean, it's no guarantee. We as conservatives hate a victimized mentality, yet we stand here all the time and say, it's not fair the news media does what it does. You know what? The news media doesn't tell me what to do. And I guarantee you, I can go out there and connect with people a lot better on a personal level than some arrogant newscaster from New York. So I say we got to go out and do that. Stop talking about what is a problem and view it as an opportunity. Guarantee you reach out to a lot of younger voters that way.
I just want to say that I like one thing that you're talking about with the individual aspect, because I think that is traditionally Republican. And I mean, not because it's Republican, but I do think that it's not that we need to stand for our principles, but it's really that we need to get back to our principles, because the individual was the basis, the constitutional rights of the individual. So.
Absolutely. I mean, you look at what the Republican Party was founded on. We were founded by disparate Whigs and Democrats who were tired of the institution of slavery destroying rights of people. Now, I know that in the South that's probably, there's a tested piece of history with that. But that's the truth of it. That's what founded the Republican Party. Individual rights at its core. Because individual people were in one of the most heinous institutions in human history. Again, I think we go back to that. We connect with younger voters. We take these opportunities, and we just take our damn country back from people that have basically been dishonest about their intentions, and that's what the left does. They make things sound great, when in reality, it ain't so great. You can't be yourself in the Democratic Party.
Was thinking about some of the things that you've been saying last weekend. I think it was last weekend. I was at the Conservative Policy Leadership Institute. Georgia Public Policy Foundation put on their annual legislative forum, and the keynote speaker was Albert Brooks. Fascinating guy, absolutely fascinating. And name probably won't ring a bell to most people, but he gained some notoriety. He was telling us about kind of how he grew up in Seattle in a very, very liberal Democrat family, and that he was in college, and I think he went to Syracuse, very liberal New York, and he went to college, and he was just some nerdy wonk who loved numbers, loved analyzing data and stuff. And I can't remember what the catalyst was, but he started writing a paper on charitable giving. And he talked about how he went into this growing up in a liberal family in liberal states, how he went into it knowing the outcome. The liberals are more generous, that they are more charitable, they're more giving, and on and on. And so he just needed to go through the motions of getting the data behind it. So he went in, did all these interviews and, studied, tax returns and correlating them with voting patterns and so forth. And once he started crunching the numbers, he was so astonished that he actually went back and had all the data redone just to make sure there wasn't any huge errors. And he said what he found out was that conservatives are by far, even though on average we have a lower level of disposable income because we have larger families and a lot more single income conservative families than liberals tend to have fewer children and double incomes and so forth. But he said he was astonished to find out that conservatives are far and away more personally charitable with not only their money, but with their time and other available resources. And the reason I kind of set that background is because the focus of his talk was on, he said, I realized over time, and I'm studying all these things, that conservative policies, even though I was brought up to loathe them, I realized through my study that conservative policies make people better. They make them happier, that happier people tend to be more conservative. They have a better outlook on life. They're less pessimistic and so on and so forth. And something you said earlier triggered that thought in my mind because, when you talk about not targeting demographics, there was an article that came out, I believe it was in Forbes a couple of years ago, that talked about the struggles that the NAACP is having. And basically, what the article said was the NAACP is having a really, really hard time connecting with young blacks because they are preaching this half-century old message of white oppression and racism and institutionalized persecution. And the young blacks are growing up having gone to school with their white racist peers. They're played sports with them. And so these young blacks, they don't see this racism, and so they're not buying the message that the NAACP is selling. And so I think a lot of what you're talking about here is really relevant in that the Republican Party, in order to reach out to these younger voters and to connect with them, really has to, and again, kind of what I said to Brad, we don't abandon principle. I mean, we are still a party of the rule of law and the individual and so on and so forth. But ironically, on the illegal immigration issue, naturalized Hispanic citizens actually poll higher against amnesty legislation than do native-born Americans because they understand where they came from and the problems that you come when there's no respect for rule of law. So going back to that Albert Brooks, how do we package this in a positive, upbeat message of prosperity, which is really what Reagan tapped into?
I think we can simply say the Republican Party can be yourself. And I think that's as simple as it is. We in the Young Republicans use the tagline, fiscally conservative, socially awesome. And everybody says, well, that just means you're socially liberal. No, not at all. It means socially, when we get together with other Republicans, we're some of the coolest people you'll ever meet. Just flat out true. But at the end of the day, you're right. I mean, somebody that, the example about the NAACP, I love Chris Rock as a comedian. I do. I just love it. And when he's talking about the relationships that he has with his daughters and the way there's an article where he talks about the fact that he's quizzing his daughters on what happened at school that day because he's worried that they experienced racism, and they're looking at him like, dude, Dad, chill. Because to them, you're exactly right. That experience for all Americans under the age of 34 is fundamentally different. The institutionalized racism doesn't exist to the degree. It still exists at some level. But the relationships with that racism and with people that aren't racist are fundamentally different. So we just need to start looking at this as an opportunity. We've got to step back out of our comfort zone at some level and say, I'm just here to listen. I mean, we as Republicans tend to have this problem where we hate being told what to do, but we absolutely love telling other people what they have to do. The irony of it, right? We just have to stand back and stop looking at this as an opportunity to not be told what to do and to tell people what to do and say, this is a great opportunity to meet somebody that I've never met before. And I'll tell you, not being from Georgia, that is the greatest single experience of being chairman of the Georgia Young Republicans. I met amazing people across the state. Absolutely amazing people. That growing up in Wyoming, you'd never have the chance to meet, one, because it's 2,000 miles away, and two, because there are like 18 people that live in Wyoming. But on the same token, I'll close it up with this, unless there's any more questions. Talk, connect with people by their name. That is the most important thing that you can do as a Republican if you want to recruit younger Republicans to the party. At the end of the day, that's what matters. And take the opportunities to learn from them. My family is a pro-choice Democrat stepmom, a military veteran dad, some weird beach hippie mom from Texas, a Bill Clinton Democrat stepdad, a teacher union sister, some weird guy that's my brother, and me, who is a very fiscally conservative Republican. Right? I grew up with a lot of diversity of thought. I was constantly challenged. I was on the debate team, which was very left-leaning. That to me was the greatest thing politically that could have happened to me, because if I grew up with people that told me the same thing that I believed, I wouldn't have the ability to impress guys like Louie, who stands in front of you and tells you I'm one of the smartest men you'll ever meet. So with that said, I appreciate the opportunity. I'll stay here as long as I need to answer questions afterwards. If you'd like a copy of our strategic plan, I'll give out all the copies I have. And December 19th, the Young Republicans in Atlanta will be hosting a screening of Star Wars. The theater is just for us. We've bought every seat. It's the day after the movie opens. Everyone in this room is welcome. You're welcome to bring your kids if you have them. Young Republicans are free to join us, and there's just a small ticket price for everybody else.
Is there more than one show, and if Louis and I bring our kids?
We have plenty of seats for both of you and your entire clans of people that will join us. So, but we'd love to have you, because it'll be a blast, and people like me may or may not dress up in a costume. Who knows? So, thanks again. I appreciate it.